I really love it. I actually like it so much that after my first 3 rides on it, I listed my road bike for sale because it made me realize how planted yet still like lively and fun a modern race bike can feel. Oh, my feet are f***ing soaked. This might be Cannondale's safest and least obvious new bike launch in years. And that might actually be the smartest thing they've done. At first glance, this looks almost identical to the outgoing SuperSix. No wild shapes, no dramatic visual overhauls, no, whoa, what is that moment? Like we've seen from bikes such as the Factor 1 earlier this year. But the more time you spend looking at it, the more you start to realize this is a bike all about the small optimizations to chase every watt and save every gram, rather than big, bold changes just for the sake of it. This is the all-new 2026 Cannondale SuperSix EVO. Now in its 5th generation, the SuperSix EVO is one of those bikes that's won pretty much everything out there, from World Championships and Grand Tour jerseys to local town line sprints, and yes, even Vancouver's Thursday Night Crit Series. For Gen 5, Cannondale has taken a very deliberate evolutionary approach rather than a revolutionary one. The goal wasn't to reinvent the SuperSix, it was more to make it faster, lighter, and more aerodynamic without breaking the bits that already worked so well. Cannondale says that this bike is faster everywhere, but they also said that about the last one. So I'm gonna say that this one is even faster everywhere. The Gen 5 SuperSix EVO was developed using extensive computational fluid dynamics and real-world wind tunnel testing. Cannondale's argument is simple. Aerodynamics matter to everyone, not just pros. From speeds as low as about 15 kilometers an hour, aerodynamic drag becomes the dominant force that you're fighting against. And because the bike makes up about 30% of the total rider bike system drag, optimizing everywhere possible on the frame is a major step towards making you faster. Cannondale went over that outgoing Gen 4 SuperSix with a fine-tooth comb, looking for every possible aero gain, while also using CFD to identify any unnecessary material that wasn't contributing to aerodynamics and cut it away to save weight. And that explains why this bike looks so familiar. Cannondale has been pretty upfront in saying that the previous generation SuperSix was already extremely optimized. All those big changes have already been made, and so this bike was really about finding more speed in very small, deliberate ways. Where that aerodynamic focus is most obvious is at the front of the bike. Side by side with the Gen 4, the new head tube is noticeably narrower and deeper, taking advantage of revised UCI regulations. Cannondale clearly concentrated their optimization efforts at the leading edge of the bike, the first thing that's hitting the wind. That same philosophy carries up to the new System Bar and System Bar SL. The standard System Bar is about 110 grams heavier than that new SL version, but it tests significantly faster in the wind tunnel despite that weight penalty. Cannondale says that it's going to be the bar of choice for EF Pro Cycling in the 2026 season. At race speeds, the Aero Bar more than pays back its weight penalty, and that's why EF is going to run it no matter what course they're on. That said, I'm stoked that Cannondale has chose to offer an SL version as well. If you're chasing the lightest possible build and are willing to give up a few watts here and there, it gives you an option to make a really light total package. Unfortunately, this specific bike isn't spec'd with that all-new System Bar here, but I did ride it for a few days in Girona in the fall, and I really like the shape, especially the flare and the drops. Those new bars attach to the now familiar Delta steer tube, carried over from the previous generation SuperSix. It keeps the cockpit clean, routes the cables internally, and minimizes the overall frontal area of the bike. It's also shared with the Super X and the Synapse, which makes sourcing parts or swapping stems a lot easier. When you get towards the back half of the bike, that's when you start to realize that the Delta steer tube isn't the only thing they borrowed from the Gen 4. The down tube, the seat tube, and the top tube all closely resemble the last generation. But when you actually run your hands along the frame, you start to feel the subtle changes. Everything is just a bit smoother and a bit rounder. One notable update that they've made to the bike overall is the geometry. Cannondale has dropped the stack height by a full 10 millimeters, making the bike more aggressive and clearly reinforcing its position as the race bike in their lineup. Given that the Synapse was only about 15 millimeters taller than the outgoing SuperSix, this change makes a lot of sense to me. It draws a clean line between their endurance lineup and their racing bikes. Overall, this frame change is very much an evolution rather than a revolution. And that's probably what we're going to see a lot more of going forward from Cannondale and other brands as well. There's really only so much optimization that you can do within the UCI constraints without hurting ride quality or handling. The SuperSix lineup remains split into 3 different carbon tiers. There's the top end Lab 71 using Series 0 carbon, the high mod, which is still quite high end, and then the standard carbon level. The Lab 71 frame weighs just 728 grams with a 392 gram fork. New for this generation are SL spec builds which prioritize ride feel, acceleration, and weight savings by utilizing the System Bar SL cockpit and shallower wheels as standard. The Lab 71 SL build comes in at 6.4 kilograms out of the box using non-exotic components. Cannondale expects to see some custom builds dipping well below the 6 kilo mark. The frame is now electronic only, with builds starting at the 105 Di2 and rival access level, and then going up from there. Carbon wheels are spec'd across the lineup with Vision, DT Swiss, and reserve wheels, depending on the exact spec. On the road, the SuperSix EVO feels exactly how you'd expect a modern race bike to feel. It's snappy, immediate, and lively. It really reminds me more of a traditional climbing bike than an all-rounder. It felt fantastic on steep climbs above 6 or 7%, and accelerating out of corners or stoplights always felt effortless. What really impressed me about this bike though, was how balanced it felt. At speed, the bike feels really planted, no nervousness or twitchiness from the front end, and through fast sweeping bends, it just felt like I was on rails. However, when you move into tight corners, it still has that sharp race bike feel and is really eager to let you lean into the corners and really push its speed through. It's one of the most composed race bikes I can remember riding recently. I rode both the high mod and the standard carbon versions, and honestly, if I was blindfolded on a flat road, I genuinely don't think I could tell them apart in terms of ride quality. Both feel stiff, efficient, and they're both surprisingly comfortable. Even if you put me on a hill, I'm doubtful I'd be able to notice the negligible weight difference between the frames. So, who is this bike for? If you want one bike that's fast everywhere, it climbs well, handles beautifully, and doesn't feel out of place on the flats or on rolling terrain, this bike absolutely nails it. This isn't a dramatic reinvention of the SuperSix, but I think that's kind of the point of this bike. The previous bike already rode very well, was very light, and was super aero. So making it even lighter and even more aerodynamic without losing its riding character is a win in my book. I think we're going to see a lot more bikes like this going forward. Lots of subtle updates, marginal gains, and fewer sweeping visual changes. But I'm curious what you think. Did Cannondale not do enough to really differentiate this bike from the last one? Or does their obsession with chasing marginal gains actually make this more appealing? Or are you just secretly relieved that you don't have to sell your Gen 4 SuperSix quite yet? Let us know down below. Let's keep the conversation going. And we'll see you on the road.